the dollar figure I've seen mentioned for an elite defensive tackle, $800,000. The Talty article, it's kind of it's nuanced in this regard. The figure it puts up is $300,000 to $500,000 as a general, like that's generally going to be the range for a defensive tackle. However, Talty did say that in this spring portal window, this 2024 cycle that we're going through, he did say supply is out, the demand is much greater than the supply, and that has skewed the market to the point that it probably is close to $800,000. But like generally, it's 300 to 500. So that might surprise some people, but the supply demand dynamics, they've been pushing dollar figures up. So some really interesting stuff from John Talty of CBS Sports on the going market rate for these various positions. Like this is something that college football fans at USC everywhere really want to know more about, and like we're beginning to get a lifting of the veil. We're beginning to get a little bit of a closer look into how the sausage is made in NIL.
Matt, do you know if those figures are reflective of exactly what's been available in the spring cycle this year, or is that reflective of what the market should yield consistently?
It's a blend. Like there was discussion from, all these sources are anonymous, like, right? They're anonymous to so that they could, be able to speak to CBS. They have, some of the insiders talked about Derek Harmon. They talked about some of the other recent spring portal guys and the dollars that they seem to be demanding. But then it also has a broader look of, how this has been going for the past several years and where the dollar figures generally end up. So it's really a blend of the two. And again, like the general range and what Derek Harmon or what specific, like Demonic Williams commanded on the market, those are two different conversations. That Williams might have gotten more than the market would normally yield just because premium defensive tackles were in very short supply in this spring 2024 cycle. So it does raise the issue of, should USC have been paying extra? Was it worth it? And that, like, that's the question that USC fans have been kicking around for a long time. And I know that Tim made the point on our Friday call-in show, hey, we have recruiting to do in future cycles, and we need to get, these incoming promising defensive prospects from the high school level. Like there isn't a limitless supply of dollars. And I know that Jeff Rodriguez, our friend Jeff Rodriguez, always supportive of this show and active in the chat, made the point that, if USC really felt that, it absolutely had to break the bank, probably would have done it, but it just didn't see enough return on the investment with particular prospects to want to take the plunge and fork over several $100,000 extra dollars.
And that the man that you're talking about, Matt, we also talked about on the show a couple of times. When you have big players, it's one thing if you had like teams like I don't know, like Kansas or someone trying to get defensive tackles, but when you had this perfect storm where you have programs like Texas, like USC, like LSU, that are looking for, and even Oregon got into the bidding wars. That's going to substantiate, just like when you're having they're bidding and then the big boys come out and they start making their $1 million bids. That's where it got out of control. And that's where programs, that have almost seems like infinite pockets for NIL, like Oregon, can overbid and pick up a guy, maybe not a position of need, but I almost saw, that Derek Harmon thing, sure, there's some depth for them, but it also kept it out of the hands of other schools. And so you have to wonder, we know that Oregon can sustain that, but these other schools, like Mark, I was thinking about this the other day. I know that you guys have a very robust NIL collective and NIL situation. at Ohio State. But it just kind of appears to me that this is a year
We have
that
yet
Ohio
to start
State-
our Voice of College Football NIL collective.
well,
That's down the road. We have other priorities.
I'm talking about the University of Ohio. I'm talking about Ohio State University.
I have no connection with Ohio State.
But you do follow the Big Ten, right?
I follow everyone.
Okay. So the Big Ten specifically, it just seemed like Ohio State is really invested in this year, and the fact that they were able to retain some guys that might have possibly gone to the NFL. They were able to pull in Judkins and what's the name of the
Caleb Downs, the safety,
Downs from
Will
Alabama.
Howard. Yeah.
Right. So this seems like there was a real investment made this year into NIL, kind of like, hey, our rivals just kicked our butts 3 years in a row and they just won a national championship. It almost seems like they're like in a position where this is their year. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think you're exactly right, because it's a combination of what they just pursued in the market, supplementing what they were able to do. No one would have forecasted if you would have said, okay, Ohio State had for them a down year, but it's still, they were 11-0 and a drive away from being the number one seed in the playoffs. So it wasn't that down of a year that they were that good, but still they were able to lure back a number of players who were at the beginning of the season ticketed for the NFL draft, but they had decent, okay seasons, didn't meet the expectations that they had set for themselves individually. And so the combination of retaining all of them and NIL kicked in to help with that effort. And then saying, okay, we were able to keep all these guys, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Emeka Ibuka, other guys, Denzel Burke, probably on three is calling Ohio State the best cornerback tandem in college football, able to retain all those guys. And then on top of it, okay, we got them. Now let's supplement that with, we need a veteran quarterback. We'll get the running back to take some pressure off Travion Henderson, who's been nicked up every season, and then the safety and Caleb Downs. And Alabama's center as well.
Right. And again, I don't know enough about the NIL situation at Ohio State, but I would have to imagine that the price tag this year with the names you just listed, the ones they retained, because people only think about that the money's going towards, incoming freshmen and bringing in guys from the transfer portal. But a big portion, I would believe, of this money stays to pay the guys that are at your school before you even think about pulling them in. And so this is going to be a big year, I believe, for Ohio State. And it might even be a case study for, going forward. Like, for instance, you guys have a pretty good recruiting class lined up as well. And how big is the war chest going to be when it comes like December? So that's all. I mean, this is what the issue. I don't like NIL, but it does spin some pretty interesting stories that you can kind of follow. This is all uncharted territory, and I mean, I'm fully on board with what they're doing at Ohio State. I think this is it. It's too bad USC, when we had Caleb Williamson say, hey, or even have the money say, okay, look, we got a difference maker quarterback here. This is the time. We need to go get a couple tackles. We need to get a couple defensive linemen, and we're going to shoot our money, our war chest, and we're going to go after it with Caleb Williams. But then the downside of that is what are you going to sacrifice going forward when you make those moves?
The per school payout for the regular season media rights deal that kicks in, the new one kicks in this year, is about 20 or 25 million more than it was for every team in the Big Ten. So that's number one. And for USC and the other three schools in from the Pac-12, well, for UCLA, USC and UCLA, but as Tim likes to point out, Oregon and Washington, what are their names?
That would be the half. It's a discount Ducks and a half off Huskies, I believe is what this is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So this doesn't apply to those two. Applies to Rutgers and Maryland, but not to those two. I think Rutgers and Maryland finally get their share coming up on their 11th season here. But 20 or 25 more million to each team in the Big Ten. And for, again, USC and UCLA, we're talking about 50, 55 more million And then the playoff cut, I don't remember what it was, but it was a fraction of the 21 million that each Big Ten team is going to receive coming up. So we're talking about 110 million per school, where USC in particular would have been more in the 40 million range total between regular season and playoff. Ohio State, Michigan, they would have been in the 70, 75 million range. So tack on another 30 to 35 million for even the existing teams in the Big Ten. So that's going to cover some of those NIL expenses.
Does it though? I mean, because it's supposed to be the NIL is supposed to be separate. I mean, where's the line drawn? But technically, that money can't go towards NIL. I mean, who knows with how fast this stuff's changing and going. But as of right now, if the NCAA can do anything, which it's proven that they can't, it's a situation where that money can be used maybe where if you had people donating, for instance, for USC's new football only facility, instead of donating money to the university to go towards the facility, it could go towards NIL Collective. So there are ways around that. But right now, that none of that money can be used by any of this UCLA or USC for NIL.